Thank you. Thank you, Lord. You all may be seated. Some of you may or may not know this past Thursday was Valentine's Day. I hope you knew. Hope you did something for that. If you didn't, of course, we scheduled our Valentine's Day party for tonight just in case you forgot to get your sweetheart something. And I have a couple spots open for that if you'd like to come and hang out with us for our Valentine's Day party tonight. Adrian, she reminded me that we've had, I think, 15 Valentine's Days together through our dating and our marriage. And I remember one time, I think it'd been after we'd been married for 4 or 5 years, we got in a fight or something, and I don't remember what the fight is, but she was upset with me about something, and she says, "You never listen." She says, "You don't pay attention to details, and I just get frustrated with you." And I said, "What do you mean? You tell me one time that I forgot something or did something wrong." And she went back, and in the annals of her cards, she pulled out a card, and she says, "Take this card and read it." And so I started reading it. It's talked about love and all the gushy stuff that a man would say to his wife or woman, and it was really, really good stuff. And then I opened up, and I had written, "See, look, maybe I read some, told you I loved you, and you're the best, and everything." She says, "Read the end." And I read the end, and it said, "To the man I love." I felt all those things, I guess. It was funny, this past Valentine's Day, I got her some roses and got her a card. And I got this really cool Peanuts card, and I was really excited about it, and I wanted her to be happy about it. And I picked her back up from work after I delivered the roses and the card. I said, "What'd you think of the card?" She says, "It was really, really nice." I said, Did you see what it does?" She goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You didn't read the card like I didn't read the card." And she said, "What are you talking about?" And she opened it up, and there was this Peanuts thing, and you had to blow in it, and the Peanuts song came on and lit up. And I said, "See, I do pay attention to details, and you forget sometimes too. You don't pay attention to everything." I know that wasn't as bad as what I did. I think through relationships, we can disappoint each other sometimes. I remember hearing, I think it was from Dr. Laura, and she defined frustration as this: when reality and expectations don't meet. And I think when we have expectations of whatever it is, or however relationship or our job, or, when our expectations aren't met, that's where the frustration comes. Today, when talking about building lives through God's eyes, I think we can build our lives when we understand our relationship with God even better. And sometimes I think there's times we don't think God knows what He's doing. I think there's sometimes we think that we got to help God along. Sometimes He's late. There's an old song that says, "He's an on-time God." Yes, He is. He's an on-time God. Yes, He is. He may not come when you want Him, but He's just right on time. He's an on-time God. And we get frustrated with God because He doesn't do the things in the manner or way that we wanted Him to do it. I know some people that want a church to grow, and then the church grows, they get mad the way that God grew it. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you want to be able to, a situation to have something to go your way, but then God chooses to do another way, and you didn't realize that it was His plan and His will all along in that situation. So I want to talk to you today about serving God when He's late. I want you to be able to have the attitude of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they said, "You know what, Nebuchadnezzar? God may save us from the furnace, and He may not, but we're still not going to bow down to you." I hope you can come away with that today. But let's look at the story in John chapter 11, 17 through 38. And we're going to go piece by piece and break this down some and unpack this. And I hope you're going to be encouraged this morning and serve God even when it's not in your time. On His arrival, starting with the 17th verse, on His arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in a tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Mary was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would have not died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at that day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. If you'd like to follow me with my sermon, on the back is some places you can fill some blanks through an outline. And your first line is this. If we think God is late, our emotion can overrun reality. If we think God is late, our emotion can overrun reality. There's amazing things that happen to human beings when they get frustrated, that reality not meeting expectation, or they feel like they've been attacked, or feel like there's a situation that is getting out of their control. I mean, you might have those emotions pop up through your children or grandchildren when they're not doing things exactly the way that you want them to do. Or maybe you have maybe you're a boss and you have workers who are not doing things the way that you would want them to do. Or you have other family members who maybe you've had, let's just say, I'm just popping this out. Hopefully you know that I'm not talking about anybody here. But maybe you had a situation in your family where money came up with someone dying, and there's that tension, and there's that butting of the heads. All those types of things and all that frustration comes in, and our emotions begin to flare. There's something naturally in us to block off our reality thinking and go from everything in our emotion. And I think Martha, she had that going on in here. And she says, if you would have been here, Jesus, my brother would not have died. My brother would not have died. And what she began to say is look it, I know you're talking about that he can rise again because there's going to be a day when the dead in Christ shall rise. She had some good theology around. She'd been sitting at the feet of Jesus. She understood about that great and glorious day that we just sang about a minute ago. But she'd forgotten something, and she had put the cart before the horse. She had begun focusing more on an event than on the person of who Jesus is. We do that a lot in Christianity. We focus on events and focus on when he's coming back, or we focus on how our situation is going in our life, and we forget that he is the resurrection and the life. Emotions will get you off the person and into thinking about things that you shouldn't be thinking about in the first place. Now again, there's nothing wrong having a good Bible study about the second coming of Christ. There's nothing wrong with talking about this mystery of how everyone's going to have their bodies and meet with Jesus in the air, and how he pulls that off is going to be a miracle, because there's been some people who have had car wrecks, or that maybe they've drowned, or maybe their body hasn't been found, or maybe they've even been cremated, all those types of things. And I know I was talking with my mom about this one day, and she says, how is he going to do all that? I said, Mom, he's God. He's God. And that day's going to happen. It's going to be a wonderful day. And see, we think about that thing as in time because the disciples, as they were writing the New Testament, they thought Jesus was coming back in their lifetime. And then we realize in the New Testament that a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day to God. And so God is not bound by time like we are. And so the events and the frustrations and the things that we don't have control, they mount up, and we forget about the person of Jesus. He speaks that way so many times in the New Testament. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the bread of life. I am the Sabbath. Yet, all these things that we learn are just metaphors to show us who Jesus is. And it's easy to forget when it feels like the mountain's too high to climb, where you feel like you dug a ditch that you can't get yourself out of. Martha saying to Jesus, where in the world were you? Have you ever said something to God like that? I see hands going up. Thank you for your honesty. Where? God, you're late. If you would have been here, my brother would have lived. And Jesus brings her back into, and he says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, and though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? And he was bringing her back to sound thinking. And she says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into this world. I want you to see something. Here's a big mistake I think humans make. And we all do this. We think that because we have a bad thought, or because the very fact that we felt angry, or we felt mistreated, or we felt ill will to somebody, we think that there's something wrong with us in that sense. And please let me free you of that this morning, that if you have those emotions, it's okay. If the question is not whether you have those emotions or not, but what do you do with them? How do you act them out? Here she was emotional. Here she was, kind of going off course. And Jesus was able to bring her back, and I don't know, maybe it's a great, of course he's the greatest counselor there ever is. He brings her back to what's reality. And you know what, for the world, Jesus being the resurrection and life is not reality. But I tell you what, as a young man, when Jesus Christ changed my life, him being the resurrection and life is total reality. It is so real. And so, through all the emotion, she navigates through her being frustrated with Jesus to saying, yes, I do believe. I'm not saying that those emotions or those crazy things in your head won't ever pop up again. The question is what are you going to do with them? What does it take for you to come back to clarity and come back to reality? Let's go on. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. And when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, same thing that Martha said. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had came along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in the spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. And then the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Do you still see? There's a contrast here. Some people seeing the love of Jesus in the whole situation, and others saying, if he could have healed before, why is he not healing now since this guy's one of his best friends? Why would he do something for a stranger and not doing for this person who he loved? Your next line in your outline is this. Jesus wept because he was connected with Mary and Martha's situation. That verse 35 is the shortest verse in the Bible. You may know this. If not, if you end up on Jeopardy or if you're in some kind of trivia thing, if somebody asks you, what's the shortest verse in the Bible, what do you say? Jesus wept. And that's the thing that, you grow up learning or whatever, and it's those two words. But again, we have to ask ourselves a question. Well, why did he cry? Why did he cry? He was moved by the emotion of the situation. He was moved by Mary's weeping. He was moved by her friends and those comforting her weeping. And I want you to know that even when you're upset with God, even when you've been crying through the night, even though you may be so frustrated within the day that you can't get your work done right, that God still weeps with you. God cares about you and I. He proved that through his son, Jesus Christ. He proved so many things. He proved, of course, being the Savior of the world. But in this context, in this place here, we see emotion coming out. I grew up Church of God. I don't know about all of you. Church of God, Anderson, Indiana. And I was taught not to show any emotion. I don't know. Did you have the same experience? I don't know. I mean, like, we could only raise one hand. We couldn't raise two hands because then we were Pentecostal. You had that experience? Or am I in the wrong church? I mean, I know Howie knows what I'm talking about. Howie knows what I'm talking about. I always thought it was funny. It's like, you can't sing Surrender All with one hand. You know, you can only sing Surrender Half, right? The thing about it is that we were taught to keep our emotions. Like if someone sang a great special or whatever, you were not to give them a hand clap because that was giving them glory and not God glory. Those were the things that we were told, and I don't agree with that at this point because I think that the Bible talks about how we're supposed to encourage and let him who boasts boast in the Lord. If people are doing things of God, we should applaud them for it. Because what God's doing in their life, not just because they're doing them. And so we have this emotion to express. And we think sometimes that we have to hold our emotions, or because we are sad, maybe God is away from us, or sad, we've done something wrong, or things aren't working in our life, and we wonder, okay, where did I mess this thing up? And I want you to know that God weeps with you. Remember I taught around Christmas, Jesus being 100% man, 100% God. He can't separate that. God in the flesh wept. He cried. Now, whether it was an overly emotional weeping or just one tear fell from his cheek, I tell you what, one tear was enough. He showed he cared about the situation. I learned in ministry that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Maybe you don't care what God knows because you don't know what He cares, that He cares. Maybe you don't have nothing to do with God because, God, I don't even think you care about my life. You let this happen and that happen. If He was really real, then these things wouldn't be going on in my life. I know I asked those questions as a teenager when my family was destroyed, when my parents were separating. I remember being on that plane from Las Vegas to Illinois thinking, God, you must not be real because my family is destroyed. But yet when that plane landed and I hung around church, and it was a while, I saw the love through people and the realness of Him. And then one day He changed me, rearranged me from the inside out. He became my resurrection in my life. I feel connected to Him. And I know this, my emotions can't make God do something. But when God does something in my life, I get emotional. He was driven by emotions in that sense. He wasn't trying to cry to show that He cared. It was the fact that He cared. That's why He cried. He wasn't trying to let everybody know what was going on. Inside, He was really in touch and connected with the situation. And you may feel like you pray to God and your prayers don't go past the ceiling. Remember, you and I are temples of the God, and all we have to do is pray within ourselves and know that God lives in us. Not that we're God, but that He lives in us. There's a lot of things that we have to do. There's a lot of questions you have to ask yourself. And it's good to get good counsel and people who know you and will tell you not what you want to hear, but tell you the truth. Some people can sit there and analyze with you. Are you in the situation because of yourself? Are you in the situation because of somebody else? Are you in the situation just because God has you there for a moment? These are all questions you have to ask yourself. We should never make any rash and harsh decisions. Because how we feel about something in the moment. I have before and I've regretted it. But I want you to know that short little verse, Jesus wept, is so powerful because it means that God is connected with His creation. And He's connected with their situation. God sees what you're going through. And He's heard your prayers. Now, maybe, of course, He hasn't answered the way that you want Him to answer, just like Mary and Martha. They wanted their brother to be resurrected, or they wanted their brother to be healed, maybe not even die. But remember, God sees you where you're at. Let's go to verse 38. Jesus once more deeply moved. Now, isn't that interesting? Don't you love when you read the Bible and you pick up something that you hadn't seen before? I mean, maybe you've seen this before. I hadn't seen it. It says, He was once more deeply moved. I'm wondering, did He weep again? Because I talked before how He was deeply moved and He wept. And so now the people around Him are seeing that He comes to this tomb and His friend is dead and it bugs Him. It does something inside of Him. And people can see the emotion that he is displaying. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days. And then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And so they took away the stone, and Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Your next line is this. God may be late from our perspective, but he is right on time from his perspective. He is right on time from his perspective. I'm going to be as gentle with you as I can possibly be. And I don't hope this doesn't stir up trouble for you. But I want you to be honest. I want to bring you back into reality. Here is the mistake most of us make with God. We think that only our situation matters. We are humans that believe this, that the sun rises and sets in our midst. I'm not saying that to pound you. I'm just trying to say that that's how our perspective is many times. And then we found out what? That the sun doesn't revolve around the earth, but the earth revolves around the sun. Did you get that? The sun doesn't revolve around the earth, even though we think that the sun rises and sets for us, but that the earth revolves around the sun. You see, we think that we're the centerpiece and God is in our orbit, revolving around us, being involved with who we are, but we forget that what we're really supposed to do is look at God's perspective and center on him. Center on him and revolve around him. Does God care about your needs? Yes, he wept for the people around him. He cares about you. But at what point are we going to take God out of our orbit and put ourselves in his? So that we're revolving around him. You see, he is light. He is our energy source. He is just like the sun. You have your momentary problem, and it seems so big because it is right there in front of you. And I'm not just speaking to you, I'm speaking to myself. And you think, God, aren't you going to work in my midst here? And we forget there's billions of people here on this earth. Could you imagine if every single person thought that God should revolve around them? Do you know what that really is? We've made ourselves into God without knowing it. See, a lot of people have a hard time centering themselves on God. They have a hard time letting God have his perspective. You see, Jesus said, look at Father, I held this back for a while because why? I wanted to bring glory to you. Yes, Martha and Mary were sad. Martha and Mary felt like that got kicked in the gut. But there was a bigger purpose going on. And it's easy to forget when you're in the midst of struggle and trouble. So I'm not blaming you for feeling that way. I'm asking you to come to reality. Come to reality and realize it's not about you and I. It's about him. See, here's God's job. This is the next line in your outline. God's job is this. He is the resurrection and the life. He provides life. He spoke the universe into existence. He did all these amazing things. And remember, he's the resurrection. Jesus himself resurrected so that we can resurrect also. He talked about it earlier to Martha in the text, and he talked to her about, okay, yeah, you're talking about that day. I understand that day where I'll come again and everybody's going to rise literally. But there's a spiritual thing that goes on to where he who believes is already alive and they will never die. He's talking about spiritual life. He is the resurrection and the life. He's doing an amazing thing, and that's his job. And we should leave it for his job. And some people will have a hard time with this Because why? Because they have not yet experienced the transforming power of Jesus Christ. I love Scripture says this, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but for those who are being saved, it's the power of God. He is the resurrection and the life. I know what I talk about sometimes may sound silly to atheists and to people that I've come across to. I know I've sounded like a joke to them sometimes, even some of my family members. I really don't care. They didn't change me. I really don't care. I love them, but I don't care what they think about me. He put a resurrection and a life inside of me. That same young man that was flying in a plane who didn't understand what God's purpose was, coming down, having an experience with him, and then being able to be a pastor. Who would have thought, God, I didn't even think I'd be in ministry when I was a teenager. And I don't even know if this is all the plan that he has for me. How in the world would you know? And you blame him for this problem and that problem. And through counseling, a lot of times I see how many people blame God for something they did in their own life, you know? It's like God's schizophrenic or something. God's job, being the resurrection and the life. The old preacher, you know what he used to say? I heard an old preacher say one time that when Jesus comes to the tomb, he says, Lazarus, awake, rise. That if he would have just said awake and rise, there would have been the resurrection already that day, and all these people would have come forward. And he was specific in showing that Lazarus was going to come alive. See, that's God's job. Let's talk about our job. Because I think we're included in this text. Because what does Jesus do after he raises Lazarus? He says what? Go and take off the grave clothes. Let him go. Our job. Unwrapping people out of their grave clothes. Our job. You see, Jesus does the changing and the rearranging, and then the people of God unwrap the mummy. Because there's a new life. Oh, I get chills just thinking about it. That's our job. Here's the thing. If you're more concerned about your troubles and you're not concerned about unwrapping some grave clothes, maybe you forgot your job. Everything else is momentary. Everything else is temporary. I mean, if you really think about it, if you get to see 75 years, 80 years, that is a long time from our perspective, but then you talk about eternity, it's nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you want to make choices that are going to be just good for this place rather than another place? That's eternal? Your job, my job, when God does the changing and the rearranging, when God does the life-breathing, life-building thing, it's our job to get involved and put our arms around the people and loose them and let them go. Isn't it awesome that Jesus did? You know, Jesus could have done it. He could have done like this and all the grave clothes would have fallen off. But he said for the people to do it. You and I have a job. And it's not worrying and it's not getting involved in silly things that keeps us from the prize. If you believe in Jesus, if we come here to church, we're really going to believe that God is transforming people. And he's going to do an amazing thing in the community. And he is doing an amazing thing in the community. If we get our eyes, folks, if we get our eyes off that type of stuff, then we have bickering and fighting, and we have people who gossip and people who don't want us. And Satan works in all that because he can get us away from doing what we're supposed to do as a church. Unwrapping the grave clothes off people who got born again. You see, part of your frustration is you're doing the wrong job. There's no joy in concentrating on your troubles. But I'll tell you what, there is joy in watching people get baptized. There is joy coming from people seeing the saving knowledge of Jesus. Because why? Now we're talking about eternal things. Now we're taking the orbit of God off of us and we're putting ourselves in God's economy. To revolve around Him. to see his perspective, to let his will be what? Our will. You see, and this might make some people mad, but it's just the truth. Jesus was late on purpose. Now, I want you to think about that. Jesus was late on purpose. Does that make you mad, or does that help you try to understand God's perspective that he might be late on purpose in your life? First of all, he talked about the glory of God to be shown. I purposely didn't do verses 1 through 16 because I wanted you to see what was going through Jesus' mind, because it seems like the text that we read, everything that the people were doing was they were focused on what Mary and Martha were going through, and they forgot what Jesus was going through and what Jesus was talking about. Verse 1 starts with this. I think it's up on the screen, yes. Now a man named Lazarus was sick, and he was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And this Mary, whose brother Lazarus was now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. And so the sisters went to Jesus. Lord, the one you love is sick. And when he heard this, Jesus said, the sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory. This is God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days, because he wanted the glory of God to be shown. He purposely didn't show up on time. How many of you would be so mad at me if you had a funeral and I was late? Purposely didn't show up. Just for the simple fact of saying, because I want to make sure. Now, we have to understand something that goes on in the Jewish culture. There was a myth in the Jewish culture that when somebody died, the spirit hovered over the body for 3 days. So notice, Jesus waited 4 days, because he wanted them to know that this guy was dead. There was no accident in this resurrection. Put a stamp of, just putting the stamp of, hey, this is the power of God doing this. And so, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you're going back? Again, wrong perspective. They didn't realize they were in God's orbit to know that Jesus was not going to die until he let somebody kill him. He was in control the whole time. He had that thing that we call, what's the word I'm looking for? Howie, help me, power under control. Meekness. He had meekness. Meekness is not weakness. It's that power under control. And they were afraid that Jesus was going to die, and Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Look what he says. Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. When you make God your orbit, you are in darkness. But when you make him the sun and you the planet, you experience light. And he's telling them and bringing them back into perspective. You guys think that something's going to happen. I'm telling you, just trust me in this. And after he said this, he went on and tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. And his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. And Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. They thought he was talking about, they still weren't getting what Jesus was trying to do in this situation. So he told them plainly, okay, knuckleheads, here's how it is. God talks to us like that a lot, believe it or not. Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, listen, for your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may believe, but let us go to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us go that we may die with him. Isn't that hilarious? The whole time Jesus saying, focus on what I'm trying to tell you here. He's dead, I'm going to rise, and it's for your sake. And Thomas is like, hey guys, we got to follow him anyways. He's taking us to death, so we're just going to go ahead and die with him. Let's go ahead and fail with him. Hey guys, let's go do that thing, and we'll just watch it all crumble and fall down. And we find out that maybe Lazarus' resurrection wasn't just for Mary, Martha, and their friends, but it was for these 12 knuckleheads. Because they still didn't get it. Please know this. If you have a prayer request, ask for it. I'll never mock you. But you have to search and look deep down in your heart. Are you expecting God to orbit around you, or are you orbiting around God? I'll weep with you, because Christ weeps with you. But when is it going to come to the point where you realize this is not about myself? People have a hard time with God because what it means then, if I orbit around God, that means I have to do things by His statutes. And that's why people fight Him. That's why they were fighting Jesus in this also. I do it in my time. Well, God, let me just do these few more things and then we'll take care of it. I'm telling you, you don't have long enough. Why in the world would you put yourself through that sin so that you can mess up your marriage and mess up your children and all that kind of stuff? I talked about last week about slaying giants. You can stop the generational curses. I have a father who's an alcoholic, and a grandfather who's an alcoholic, and a great-grandfather who's an alcoholic. I was the next alcoholic. You can stop those things when you orbit around God. You know, I use orbit because I'm a Star Wars nerd. I'm sorry. But we have to let His perspective become our perspective. And His statutes become our statutes. You see, every single one of us, as we sang earlier, and how Diane talked about that we have fallen short. We've all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. None of us have the right to set the bar. None of us do. Only God was perfect, so He sets the bar. And that's why we believe in Him. He's setting the bar here. He's letting them know that don't be so concerned about events. Be concerned about who I am in you. Because I am the resurrection and the life. Center yourself on that. Let it be your power. Let it be your strength. And you know what? I promise you this. The troubles won't go away. But you'll have somebody to take you through it. Don't think, I am not going to give you that false gospel that you come to Jesus and all your problems go away. I want to give you a gospel that's real, and I want us to be focused on reality. And that we can help each other through that. He cares for you and I. He weeps for you and I. And He wants to live in you and I. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes.